This episode is brought to you by Purple Circle. Purple Circle takes the frustration out of technology and lets you focus on what matters most. With Purple Circle, you get a plan that enables you to get to your goal without having to worry about the technology. For your free consultation, head over to purplecircle.io. That's purplecircle.io. Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Blackwood and Fig. I'm your host, Will Figueroa. That over there is KJ Blackwood, and boy, do we have an episode for you. Thank you so much for being here, KJ, and I hope you're doing really well.
I'm really good. In fact, this is my favorite part of the week, because I get to just talk and tell you what's in my head.
And it is interesting what's in that head of yours. Of course, we are speaking about KJ's book, 7 Endings, 7 Short Stories to Make Your Skin Crawl and Your Eyes Water. And boy, this is another one. This is a good one. This is a juicy one. You know, before the show, KJ and I were going back and forth via text message, and we were kind of prepping for the show. And I said, man, I'm so looking forward to this one, because this one I could really relate to. This one, because I was bullied. This one was really hard, you know? So I understood the characters for this story. KJ, why don't you go ahead and tease us with the story a little bit, and then we'll go into some of the questions.
Well, it's about a boy who is in his early teens, and he's having a hard time. He's quite sensitive. He's a gentle boy. He's a nice kid. And he has a nemesis at school who was once his friend and is now his bully. And I think that happens a lot. And he gets pushed to the very edge. And he goes over the edge. And the way I've written it, some of it is based on past experiences, and some of it is based on things that I've seen, the environment I grew up in as well. And I realized rereading this, it's a lot swearier than I remembered. Because, I think a lot of adults don't realize this, but when you're a kid, you swear a lot. And the language in this, I think, is real. And it's the F word, and there's even the C word once. I shocked myself.
Yes.
And I do feel that the anxiety in this, rereading it, I felt it again, that anxiety. But then I also felt relief at the end as well. It's like when you watch something like what's that film? I Spit on Your Grave. Have you ever seen that? It's
No.
They did a remake, and I saw the remake, and it's about this woman she's brutalized. It's awful, but she gets revenge. And so revenge is cathartic. So
it really is. This one, although heartbreaking, this one for sure is cathartic. It's you know, the little man finally getting his, but in a very, very different way. We'll always save that portion for the second part of the show. We definitely want to get into the development of the characters. So if you haven't read The Worm That Turns, that's the one that we're reading for this week. So pause the video if you're watching this later. Now would be the time to do that. We want to make sure that in the second half, we have all the spoilers. We're going to try and go spoiler free for the first half, as we always do. And then for the second half, we're going to go carb notch. So tell me more about the development of Jamie and Darren. And I'm noticing very specifically the way that you write, especially when it comes to kids, you make it a point not to involve the parents. There's this common thread that you have that as you continue to write some of these other stories, especially with the children, there's not so much of an emphasis. It may emphasize the child's story, but it doesn't necessarily emphasize the whole story. Can you give us a little insight on that and why you do that?
I think that's very perceptive of you, because that stems, I think, from me. Because growing up, I've always been quite solitary. I've always felt that even when I interact with other people, I'm really just in my own head. And so my whole private life just my whole life was inside me, and so I wouldn't really tell my parents anything I was doing at all. If this, how was your day? I'm fine. Any detail? Yeah, I went into town. I don't know. I've always been like that, and I think a lot of kids are like that, and some are more obviously. How could you put it? Like enclosed, but certainly I learned to pretend to be more sociable than I actually am. So
are you Jamie in a sense? Are you writing from your own point of view as Jamie?
Except I was never actually bullied as a child,
Oh.
but because I was quite sensitive, I could always see the potential that I could have been, because I always felt like an outsider, and it's outsiders that get bullied. And interestingly, see, my father died 20-something years ago, and his brother, my uncle, he died a couple of years ago, he read this story, and my father had died. And I knew growing up, because I was always I was an awkward child, because I always felt different. And so I think my interactions with people were a little bit unusual. And I think my uncle probably thought I was a little bit weird. And after he read the book, I was on my own with him, and he said he'd read it. And he told me that he thought he understood me better having read it.
Wow.
Which concerned me, because I think he thought that was my life. And that made me feel awkward, because in fact, this story, even though I wasn't bullied myself, it feels like the most personal of my stories to me, because it was always at the back of my mind that it could happen. And you see how kids, they gang up on other kids. And in fact, before I went to secondary school, there was a TV program in the UK called Grange Hill, which was set in a school, in a comprehensive school, which is what I went to. And I was at primary school at this point, about to go to senior school. And it was terrifying, because on this program, it was bullying. It was a thing called bog washing, where they put a kid's head down the toilet and flush it. I was so scared.
We call those swirlies here in the US.
I'm sure it happens the world over.
Yeah.
So, I was so worried that I would be bullied, and I always felt different because I wasn't fully white. I think I just knew I was different even then, and you see it happening to other people, and so that anxiety was always there. And this boy Jamie, he parts that really are based on my life were that I dreaded going to school on Monday morning. I absolutely dreaded it, not because anything bad would happen. I just I liked being at home.
Yeah.
And so I would extend my night as long as possible. I would watch anything on the TV in my room. Anything.
That explains the series that Jamie is watching, right?
Yes.
The Antique Road show, and I think there's like a Praise and Glory show, right? I was like, wow, this is kind of out there.
Song of Praise. It's in a church, and it's hymns.
Yes.
And it was Sunday night, and then you'd have the Antiques Roadshow Sunday night, and I would just watch anything on TV. It didn't matter what it was, and I would concentrate on it until I lost myself in whatever that program was. And I would just keep watching, just to prolong my evening, because when I went to sleep, it would just go like that, and I didn't want to just wake up and it would be Monday morning again. So I would stay up as late as I could, 1, 2 in the morning, just to push away Monday morning. Yeah,
this seemed very personal. The way that you wrote it, in comparison to even the first story, the way that you write it, there's just so much more detail. There's attention to detail. Not that there's more detail, but there's so much more attention to detail into why Jamie started doing things. And so this felt very, very personal. And so now it explains everything, right? You're staying up late, you're dreading Monday. This makes so much sense. Can you explain for those of us, because I definitely had to Google it. Can you explain to us merchant ivory?
Oh, well, in fact, that's a bit where there's an error in what I wrote.
Oh.
Merchant Ivory, they made these wonderful films, these adaptations, period dramas. And I said that they had a Merchant Ivory adaptation of a D.H. Lawrence novel.
Yes.
Actually, it was E.M. Forster. It was always E.M. Forster that they did. Although D.H. Lawrence wrote wonderful books too at a similar time. But no, I should have written E.M. Forster because I was obsessed with Merchant Ivory films. They always had Helena Bonham Carter in them, always.
Was it easier for you to get lost in these in comparison to some of the other things that you would watch on those Sunday nights?
Yes, and I knew them so well. I think because they were a way of losing yourself in another world, in a genteel world where everyone's polite, and everyone sort of says all the right things, and even if you're being mean, you'll say it in such a nice way that you think. And one of the films, A Room with a View, I once watched it every day for 2 weeks because I had a video cassette. People might not realize what those are. They're like VHS cassettes. And I just adored those movies. And I read the book about, I think, 3 times.
Oh my gosh.
I just loved them so much. I think I've watched every single Merchant Ivory film. I read all the Ian Forsters. And those were something that could, I could just completely lose myself and forget about everything. I could forget about all the worries of going to school, even though being rational, there was nothing to worry about. It's like now, and I'm sure lots of people can relate to this, you can dread starting your working day. I think, oh God, got to go.
The Monday blues, right? Yeah. The Sunday blues for Monday, right?
Once you're there, it's not so bad,
Right.
Suddenly it's the end of the day, it's not so bad at all. But the dread beforehand, it's sometimes impossible to be rational, and you worry about things that just aren't worth worrying about. And you need to find coping mechanisms, I think, and ways to help. And for me, period dramas was one of those.
So talk to me about the reason why you spend that time in explaining the walk from Jamie's home to the school to the yard. Is it really just to emphasize the time?
It's the dread.
That was my question. Is it really just to emphasize the time, or is there more to it? Because what came to mind when I was reading it was, almost like the walk to almost like death row or the electric chair, or like, he would always have this, or it seems as though that on a daily, he would have to die. Like every day he was dying to himself. A piece of himself would finally die.
When you feel that sort of dread, I think if somebody said to you, okay, you can go to school, you've got your walk to school, or we can shoot you and kill you, you'd think, yeah, I'll take that.
Right.
I don't have to go through that, because that it's a terrible dread like that is just horrible. Your blood pressure's going through the roof. And in his case, he's got something to really worry about, because there is a monster coming at the end of his walk. And that's just so stressful.
Yeah.
Isn't it awful to know, though, that there are so many kids that go through this on a daily basis? I have a very good friend whose son is going through this at the moment.
Wow.
And I actually thought, would it be good for him to read my story? Possibly not.
Probably not. Knowing the type of author that we are, because we don't want to give away anything to the second half, you should probably wait until maybe he's a little older.
Yeah, it might help him, and to know that a lot of people are going through this.
Right.
I wouldn't want him to go
off the edge, if you will. Right. Yeah. Sure. Yeah. Absolutely. So you make it a point to have 2, maybe even 3, and hardcore escalation moments where the first moment that we have with Darren is ultimately the bully that we're speaking about. You make it a point to talk about Marlboro Reds, because the other ones are, they're weaker. You make it a point. Yeah, you make it a point to have a second connection where there's the threat. And then we'll talk about the third connection, the third meeting on the second half, right? Talk to us about how you envisioned Darren. Was this just the culmination of people? Is Darren nothing more than the physical embodiment of maybe the dread that you faced going to school. Explain where Darren comes from and why so specific in his character.
He's not based on anyone that I know. He is a sort of a melange of different people I've encountered as a child, as an adult. And in fact, even his name is see how Jamie is such a nice name. And in fact, because my middle name's James, and so Jamie is like the it's like the nice version of Kelvin. It's the nice version.
I love this.
So he'll wear, like woolen sweater vests, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Darren is the embodiment for me of rough and mean. And in fact, Darren, as is explained a little in the story, he's mean because of his background. He hasn't had a good time, a good start in life, and it's made him a really horrible young man, and that does happen to people. Like, people are mainly, I think, a product of their upbringing. Obviously, nature comes into it as well, but he's an amalgam of a certain type of person that I've encountered, and he's the opposite of Jamie because they have very different lives. Yet they were friends when they were young, and in fact, that's the thing. When kids are put together, they don't see differences when they're
right.
That comes later, and it's so divisive, and it happens throughout society. I mean, when you go to the school gates, you'll see people from similar socioeconomic backgrounds they gather together
for sure,
and they'll exclude anyone that's different to them, unless it's maybe from a higher echelon that they want to aspire to. But if they think they're beneath them, they just don't mix. And not everyone, obviously, but it happens a lot. And so I say poor Darren as well, really. He's a product of his upbringing, and he picks on he thinks he's picked on the right person, his former best friend. He thinks he's weak, and yes, he is. Well, no, he's nice. He's nice. He's not weak, but you can only push someone so far.
Yeah, you don't go into that, and I wanted to ask why. Why didn't you go into the moment in which there was a divide? Because at one point there is a confrontation in the book where he says, please just, and the inner monologue was like, oh, I just want to be left alone. And I know I can relate to that. I was bullied for years growing up, so I can totally empathize with this. I don't think I was ever, in retrospect, and as I'm reading this, this just ended up, at least for me, the bully in my life. It was always that case. There was never a real friendship. If anything, it was more like, what they call a frenemy, right? It was one of those kind of situations. But here, you make it a point to where you mention that they're friends, and then something happens, but you don't go into detail. So, would you go into detail now having read it and having have it sit? And if so, what would it have been?
I don't think it needs any more detail than is there. The thing is that Jamie, as he explains, he doesn't know why they stopped being friends. He doesn't know. But from Darren's point of view, it was Darren's inferiority complex, because he felt that he was lesser. Jamie had the big house. He has everything that Darren didn't have, and that will engender bitterness. And I think a lot of friendships are affected by that as kids grow up, when other kids have things that you don't. When I was a kid, there was less of that, I think, because nobody cared. I'm probably the last generation where nobody cared what brand of trainer you were wearing, or that you got your t-shirt from the market for £2 or something. Nobody cared. Whereas now, it must be even worse now. And kids will get bullied for not having the right label. Absolutely.
I mean, I remember growing up and being bullied for, the sneakers that I had on, the shirt that I was wearing, and not just from the one bully, but just, from a cultural perspective, for whatever reason, in school, it it was a thing. It's absolutely horrible because it absolutely degrades the person.
Yeah.
And it's out of their control, right? This is a kid, right? They can't, they don't work, they don't have any money. There's nothing there's nothing that they can do about it, right?
No.
And depending on the socioeconomic status of that kid, maybe they could tell mom and dad, and maybe mom and dad can do something, or foster parents, or whomever they're living with. But if they can't, they're screwed. There's nothing they can do.
As a child, mostly they think that they can't, because to them, their bully, that's the one they've got to deal with the next day.
Right.
So if they complain about them, they could just be making it worse. And I think very often schools don't help very much. They don't get involved in the way that they should. And so for a lot of kids, I think it must seem that it's just never ending until they get to leave school.
Right.
And that's a heck of a burden to put on any child.
And not only that, but especially today, right? And my heart goes out to anyone having to go through this. And I don't think we should let the episode go by without saying, like, if something is happening, if you're watching this and you're feeling this way, you need to tell someone. Tell someone you trust, tell an adult, tell a teacher, whoever you need to tell them. It doesn't make you weaker. It doesn't make you, it's really important that you tell someone, right? In fact, I would even call this even a cautionary tale, because the way that this story evolves, and we'll get to that in the second half, unfortunately, it gets to a point where, kids do think about these things. And don't get me wrong, right? As a fictional story, you want something like this to happen, but not at that level. It takes a very dark and twisted turn at that level in order to be redeemed. And so, the point being is, I would definitely want to make it a point to say, if this is actually happening to you in your life, talk to a teacher, talk to a friend. I give kudos to my mom, who, when we were going through this, one of the things that she would tell me is, make sure you tell the teacher, right? Or we had a lot of teachers' assistants, like in the playground, and we had monitors, and we had people who would just make sure that the kids were okay. And so she kind of went through the hierarchy with me going, being bullied for years. And she said, first tell the monitor, and then if they cut it out, then you don't have to worry about it. And then tell the teacher. And then if after telling the teacher, then, make sure you tell me in between that. And then also, let's make sure that afterwards, if it continues, let's go ahead and make sure that we tell the principal. And then if the principal doesn't know, right? And we just kept going up and up and up and up. And I personally will never forget the moment where, unfortunately, we had to have like a scuffle, and I didn't want that to get it to that point. And today it could be really dangerous to get to that point. So we need to like nip it in the bud as soon as possible. To your point earlier about maybe being the last generation of not being made fun of about shirts and things of that nature, I think I was the last generation that you could get into like the final scuffle, if you will, and then it's over. It doesn't continue. And today, with social media and smartphones and things of that nature, it continues outside of the classroom. And so if you're going through this, if you're watching this and you're going through this, reach out to an adult, reach out to a teacher, someone you trust, and let them know what's going on, because it's definitely something that I know, like I said earlier, it hit a chord. So suffice to say, we have three major points that Darren and Jamie have kind of a hardcore interaction with. And like I said before, it exponentially increases in, you said before, anxiety. I think it's just, you're sitting on the edge of your seat, if this was a movie, because the first time he absolutely rips his lunch out, right? And then he's hungry. He goes throughout the day hungry. And then he's forced like an animal to eat this food that fell on the floor, right? And then we get to the second one. And this one is definitely an exponential leap from what I would consider a schoolyard bully into something that's very adult. And this is when we get this really sick turn. Can you explain why there's a 200 euro or pound demand from Darren? What is it in Darren's mind that you don't write about, that this demand comes from Jamie and ultimately threatens Jamie for it?
Before that, the bit about the lunch, because there's a relevance between the two.
Sure.
The thing about the lunch is that his mother lovingly packed his packed lunch.
Mm-hmm.
And certainly when I was growing up, I always felt that I just loved my mum so much, you know, mums and sons. Anything my mum did for me, I'd be thinking, you know, if anyone touched that, I'll kill them. You know? So his mum is with him in that lunch.
Right.
Having that taken away from him is a big deal, as well as the humiliation.
Mm.
The lunchbox itself, he's going to have to tell his mum that he's replacing. But then, yes, the escalation where Darren demands this money from him is because Darren's basically a drug dealer.
Mm.
He wants money to, you know, buy more drugs to sell, and he thinks Jamie's rich. He thinks his parents got money. He can get it for me, and he knows to threaten Jamie by using his mum, you know, and saying, you know, I'll send pictures to your mum.
So now I understand
how
the tie
pretty
from
she
the
is
mom.
as well.
Yeah.
And then walking past the window, he sees his mum in the living room, and then he says she's looking good and winks. You know, it's that threat to your mother. Honestly, if anyone threatened my mother, that would send me over the edge.
I mean, I think anyone, right? I mean, I think anyone would send them off the edge. And I love the comment. What? I did not expect, drugs behind Darren. You know, I thought it was maybe more, extortion, or to like, you know, maybe there was something else, right? Maybe there was a story that he knew about, because you didn't go into that break. So I thought maybe he knows something. Maybe there's, like it's almost, a ransom for information, right? So I feel the same way, my love. That's my wife in the comments. Thank you always for being on the show. Appreciate you so much.
Maybe I went to a rougher school. I don't know.
Right, exactly. So now, I mean, we're going to get to the second half now. So before we get into that, we're going to do a little in-house break. Guys, we're here with KJ Blackwood, the author of 7 Endings, 7 short stories that will make your skin crawl. If you haven't already picked it up from Amazon, make sure you do so. Phenomenal read. If you've been sticking through with this series with us, it's been fantastic. We'll be starting a new series really soon with our very own KJ Blackwood, and we'll be talking about that really soon. So I'm really excited to be doing this show with him, and so excited that we're able to feature him in his book first. The other thing that we want to bring up too is make sure you text the show. If you haven't already done so, be sure to do so. BAFShow to 305-697-6013. BAFShow to 305-697-6013. And you'll get the inside scoop on what we will be reading next, what we're discovering, and so much more. And then, of course, finally, you got to go to the merch store. Hit us up on Blackwood and Fig. It supports the show. It helps us grow and scale and to do so much more. We want to start doing live events. We want to start doing things with schools and other things. So make sure you support the show. We love that you watch. Make sure you like and subscribe. Everything helps, even if you're just telling a friend. We appreciate you so much. So thank you. So now that we're on the other side of the commercial, this is the time where there's spoilers, so pause it now. There are spoilers right now. Holy mackerel, does this story take a completely different turn. So originally, I was thinking, because there's a week of bliss in which you speak about, and it's a twisted bliss, because not only is he having a decent week, but here's this thread of dread haunting him. And there's a moment where he goes, aha, there's almost an aha moment. Where do you think this aha moment comes from? Because it doesn't necessarily go into where the idea comes from. You just speak about, now there's a new sense of confidence. Can you explain that?
It's like it's a sense of calm. It's because that week before it happens, Darren has said he'll leave him alone, and he does, which is great. But it's like being on death row. it's all very calm, but you know what's happening at the end. And he is so stressed. He goes to bed. Oh, that's sweet.
Finish the thought and we'll go to the comment. Finish the thought.
So he's so stressed. Overnight, you know, when you dream, your mind is putting things to rights. So all your dreams are really your brain just processing what you've been through.
Right.
And he wakes up in the morning, and I think I say a doctor might say he'd got insane, but his brain has resolved it for him and thought, I'm going to put an end to this. And he's resolved. He's going to put a stop to this. And so he's calm. He's I've got a solution to this. It's a dramatic one, but you can't deny that would put an end to the problem. And you know how when you come to realization and you realize that the problem that you've been agonizing over for ages, you think there is a solution. Actually, I can deal with this. You do feel your blood pressure gets lower, and you feel a sense of calm. And
you even speak about this at the dinner table for that weekend. You speak about how it's like, oh, you seem so calm.
Yeah. And his parents, you know, because they only know him when he's wound up all the time.
Right.
They don't know what it's about. And I mean, he must seem a bit like a zombie to them. They must think, who is this lovely, calm child, you know? And I think often parents, they might just think that, and they don't question any further than that and think, what is actually going on with my kid? And so, yeah, he suddenly has this cool resolve. I'm going to end this today. And I think he does it with a sense of humor as well.
Yeah, I mean, the character that I think of almost immediately is, you know, the Joker from Batman, you know, or for, you know, this really sick and twisted, you know, it's as if murder is funny.
Yeah,
you know, he's enjoying now that it's no longer, you know, it's a cat and mouse game, but he's no longer the mouse. And boy, does he have a way to get his mouse. I want to get to the comment really quickly and go back for that thought. Natalie writes, I thought it went deeper with Darren, like he was a poor kid, he was hungry, but that's not something he would ever share because of his pride. I guess I always assume the best in people, and yes, love, you do.
that would have been it at the beginning, yes.
Yeah.
But then it changes in something else, and I think things that happen to you in your life, they change who you are. And you can go from being a good person, it doesn't happen overnight, you go from being a good person to being a bad person. And Darren has become a bad person. Yes, it is because of what happened to him, which is unfortunate. But sometimes you can't go back from being bad.
Yeah.
And in fact, Jamie, at this point, he's a different person. He's no longer the kind but stressed boy he was before this night. He's been changed irrevocably. He can't go back from this. And he really, once he's done this, he really can't go back. I think once you've committed this sort of crime, it must change who you are as a person. And in fact, once you've done it once, I mean, he's not going to take crap from anyone ever again, is he? Once he's out, you know.
Because now he quite literally has the power of God. He knows what he can do now at this point, or what he's about to do, and we'll get to that in a moment. I have a note here, which is why I keep looking off. I have my notes here off the side here, and I write here, ooh, big change here, and I'll read the snippet here. He says, and this is the confrontation when Darren, you know, they're in the wreck, right? So they're outside, and you know, this is the moment. And he says, why me? We used to be friends. What changed? He says, why you? What a question. Isn't it obvious? You're a stuck up little, you know, whatever, and you need to be brought down a peg or two. And he keeps going on and on about the class difference, right?
Yeah.
And so Jamie was angry, not with Darren, but with himself. How had he allowed himself to become so pathetic, to conform to the middle class stereotype by being a softie, a total wimp? Well, that was ending right now. And he takes a breath to calm his face, not to show any emotion. Then the wheels of change are set in motion, basically. And so it ends now. And ultimately, Darren, who threatened him in the middle of this story for those 200 euro, shows him a knife and shows him the glimpse of a knife in the middle of that. And what does Jamie show up with? But what seems like a Crocodile Dundee style.
You call that a knife? This is a knife.
Yeah, exactly.
I think there might even be a line from Crocodile Dundee.
It is. That was my question to you. Is this like an homage to Crocodile Dundee? Like he's not going to take anything from you, you know? But like the inverse, is that where that comes from for you?
It probably does actually, because I had watched it several times as a teenager. So yeah, that would have sunk into my head, and I wanted it to be a bit like, well, it's a revenge thing, you know, like Falling Down, or you know that film with Michael Douglas where he is a different person, and so suddenly he can be humorous as he gets his big knife out, and he feels the power, and he's no longer scared, and there's a wonderful moment for him where Darren looks scared just as the knife comes up.
Yeah, there's a realization, right? And it's in that realization that I think Nat has a comment here where she says, this is how serial killers are created. You know, we hear these stories, you know, and I think it's that moment, and you do a great job. I mean, it's really just brilliant in really like relishing in the power moment. You make it a point to allow the reader to almost have mixed emotions. I mean, not almost, I totally had mixed emotions, because once you see the knife, you know what's going to happen. I mean, you can anticipate this really well. So there's a piece of you that as the reader, you're reading and you're like, yeah, he should get it back. And you're like, oh, wait a minute. You know, I've read The Nanny. I've read, you know, how is this going to go? You know, and I got to be honest, you know, I thought in that week of bliss and this aha moment, especially after reading Communication Error, you know, I thought there was going to be a gun involved. I thought he was going to off himself. I thought, you know, because oftentimes you read these horrible stories about these moments of people who, you know, unfortunately do these things to themselves. And they talk about this bliss, if you will, just prior. But this takes a whole different angle that you're talking about. And you make it a point to really, you know, I almost imagine him walking around, you know, Darren with this knife, just, you know, twiddling it around and really just making him squirm, or when the worm turned, right? Is this where the title comes from? Is this moment here?
This is the moment the worm turns, yes. But he has to do it quickly. That's why he does it quickly, because Darren, you know, he's done this kind of thing before. He'd probably be able to overpower him. So he has to have the element of surprise, which he does have. But what's interesting, I think, is I'm curious to know how you thought about this moment, because the way I think about it is that I love the revenge. I think it's what a lot of people want. And while slashing someone's throat is taking it too far, it's something I think a lot of people would love to do.
Oh, that's what makes it so juicy.
It's the thing that you fantasize about. You think, oh,
yeah, that's what makes this story, you know, so juicy. You always have your surprise ending. That's the type of author that you are. Clearly, there's always a twist. There's a turn. There's always something that, you know, maybe we expect, we anticipate, and then, you know, it's like, whoa, that's a whole different story. But we almost anticipated this even in the schoolyard, because it's very stereotypical, right? We know this story of the bully in the schoolyard, unfortunately, all too well. And so I felt as though it could go one of two ways. But boy, when it goes into this way, when he finally slashes his throat, it's like, oh my gosh, you know, like, that's horrible, you know. And now you're seeing, and to Annalise's point earlier, now you're seeing like, oh, was this line of thinking always in him? Is this the beginning of, you know? And then I think, of course, more books, right? So is this the beginning of a new series of Jamie? Is there more? You know, when you were writing this, were you trying to think, oh yeah, we could spin this off? Are those the things that you think about?
No. However, I think it's a good point that Jamie could, from this point, he could become a serial killer, because up until this, he's become a different person. He's no
Yeah.
longer who he was, and he's now killed someone. He's enjoyed it. He's enjoyed this moment, and he says the pleasure of seeing Darren's fear was worth any amount of time in prison. And so, yeah, he's taken real pleasure in that moment, that wonderful revenge that we all want at some point. You know, when you feel that you've been wronged, and yeah, I think potentially you've done it once. Anything you do the first time, the second time's a lot easier with anything.
Yeah, you know, it's so. I'm so torn. You know, you're torn, right? Because we know that this is fiction. You want the revenge. You want that kid to be redeemed, but you're like, no. Like not like this. Not like this. It should never. Yeah, it should never be like this. And then, yeah. What is that? Why you don't write about the relationship with the parent other than the mom? Is to emphasize that he didn't know, or maybe there wasn't a relationship. Is that another reason why, or is this just my own train of thought?
Would you say I did write about the mum in terms of?
Well, if like why would Jamie even get to that point? How would he even know to get to that point? You know, he's watching these praise and glory shows and Antique Roadshow. How does this thought even come to him?
He's watching anything that's on the TV, and from a young age, so many movies, even children's movies, involve a lot of violence and revenge and knives and guns. Everyone is aware that if you use a knife on someone, you might kill them. I think.
Right.
And yeah, he knows what he's going to do. He's fully intending on killing him, and I think what I'm trying to say with this is that Darren initially was a good kid. His circumstances turned him into a bad kid. Jamie was a good kid, a nice middle-class kid.
Right.
But what happened to Darren has then had an impact on Jamie and caused this and changed him. And now he's a bad person. And it's human nature, and I've said this many, many times, it's human nature that is just, it's the worst thing in the world, because it turns people bad. And the effect we have on other people. The times when, I don't know, you're in a bad mood, so you're a bit short with someone, you know, you're a little bit mean.
Right.
It can ruin their day. In fact, people that work in retail, I worked in retail, they will tell you the worst people on the planet are customers. And I don't know what it is about people. You know, you're a normal, nice person, but you go into a shop and you turn into an absolute bastard. And you forget that the people you're dealing with are human beings, and they have feelings, and they have lives outside work, and they have families.
Yeah, people forget for whatever reason. You go in, and I worked retail too. You know, my father worked retail growing up, and still works retail to this day. Right? I mean, it's pardon the pun, it's cutthroat.
Yeah. Well, I wonder how many people working in retail have become serial killers because of the way they've been treated.
or want to, right? Because at the end of the day, people could be just so vicious.
Yeah, and there are consequences. And so this is two good kids who've become bad kids. One of them's dead. The other one's probably going to spend his life in prison. And that's tragic.
I mean, beyond tragic, and it speaks to how you write about the human condition. And I think this is all 7 stories speak about the human condition in one aspect or the other, whether it's being a parent, whether it's being a child, the nanny, relationships. I mean, you go through a whole gamut of so many things that I think you really capture really well. The dark spirit, if you will, of the human condition. So let me ask you then this: if that's the case, then how do we as readers make sure that we are involved with things that inspire that human condition, right? Because you spoke, I think maybe 2 episodes ago, how what you write about is because you're grateful, right? This is a bad turn, right? whether you lost someone, well, I'm grateful that I had someone, right? Whether it was, like in the communication error or even the nanny, right? There's moments where it's like, oh wow, I am so happy and grateful now that, right? So how can we ensure and maybe even inspire ourselves when we're around those people? How would you do that, knowing your writing style, right? How do we make sure that we don't become like Darren?
Well,
Because Jamie was a good kid.
yeah. And all you can really do, I think, is encourage not just yourself, but other people. And this is going to sound really cheesy, but to be kind. It's that whole hashtag be kind, because the only reason Jamie's gone bad is because Darren wasn't kind.
Yeah.
And it's the impact you have on other people. So if everyone could just be a bit more aware that other people are going through stuff, just, don't judge people unless they've done something, not nice, but just do your best not to judge people and be aware that people have feelings and don't be unkind.
Yeah. Great question from Nat below. She says, or do you become a better person because now there's an understanding of what someone else is going through? Working retail, I became more aware of what a store clerk goes through.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. And having empathy, if we just had more empathy, I think, the world would be a much nicer place, but human nature gets in the way. But all you can do is your best to be kind. It does sound so cheesy, I know, but
I mean, more than ever with everything that we're going through with the current, socioeconomic, political circumstances that we're in today, globally, not even just here in the US or, in the UK. Now more than ever, I think this is a pretty appropriate story, to talk about the extremes in some really sad cases and a lot of sad cases where we've gone to, and how far we've come. I was having a recent conversation about really understanding and having a moment to reflect and look back and to recognize, where have you come from and where are you going? What direction are you going? And I think this is a great tool, this story, to, I can imagine this with teachers and with students at schools and, in other places, to talk about the extreme, maybe where we've gone as a society, and how it's okay to be able to take a turn. You don't have to turn into Jamie. You can do a full, 90-degree turn and go in a completely different direction. It's okay. You don't have to go back, but if you're going in this direction, you have up until that last moment, really, truly, to make a turn and make a change in your life. To wrap things up, you make it a point to, as Darren innately kind of, cups his throat, and there's this moment. I imagine him kind of dropping to his knees and this really dramatic moment. You make it a point to really emphasize how just stone cold this moment was. He takes the knife, he washes it in the nearby creek, and nonchalantly walks home to dinner. And then and then dinner. Oh man, so sick, so twisted. Talk to us about the dinner scene.
Well, his mother has made roast beef because she's so happy that he seems calm.
Right.
So having lovely rare roast beef because the blood is pooling on the plate, and he thinks it looks lovely. And I think this is his father, carves it.
Yes.
So the pieces of meat. It's like
with the same knife, by the way.
Well, that's intentional, and that's actually inspired by a Roald Dahl story from years back, from the 60s or 70s. Do you remember Tales of the Unexpected, Roald Dahl?
No. Tell me about it.
There was one episode where a man has been murdered. He's been battered on the head and he's murdered. And his wife is at home cooking a roast leg of lamb, and the police are there, and they're questioning her, and it's just finding out what's happened.
Sure.
And it's only at the end, as the police are eating this roast lamb, you realise it was a frozen leg of lamb previously, and that's what she used to kill her husband.
Oh,
so they're eating the weapon, and they're having dinner with the very weapon that Jamie used to murder his nemesis. And he's loving that too. So in fact, this last paragraph, I think he's going to be a serial killer because he's enjoying seeing the blood on the plates and the meat slices falling onto the plates, which is kind of reminiscent of the.
So there you go. You have it from our own KJ Blackwood. This is the beginning of a serial killer, and I gotta be honest. It was the moment when he was really like taunting and teasing Darren, combined with this moment, that I thought, oh man, there has to be another series on this. There has to be, and of course I go to the almost like Marvel comic style of things where maybe he goes and does this to all the bullies, or and goes on and continue, so maybe he's not a serial killer, but he's a serial killer in a different, you know what I mean? So there's still murder, but maybe there's some good there. I don't know.
This is how superheroes are born.
Yeah, absolutely. Or villains. Yeah, exactly. I think there's some real potential here. I mean, I think I've said it on all the stories. I think there's spin-offs. I think there's real potential. I think the writing is absolutely brilliant. And this one, when the worm turned, there's just no end to the potential. And the final comment here, Dexter, yes. Yes.
Is he a good man or a bad man? I can never decide with Dexter.
Little do we know. KJ, it's always a pleasure to speak with you. Once again, we are reading KJ's book, 7 Endings by KJ Blackwood. 7 short stories to make your skin crawl and your eyes water. Go ahead and tease us about next week, The Cat Lady.
Oh, The Cat Lady. Yes. We all know a cat lady. Which a woman who lives on her own and who loves cats. There's that stereotype of the crazy cat lady. This one, though, she really is a bit crazy, creepy crazy. And the next time you visit someone who likes cats, check out the pots on their shelves.
Love it. Well, to everyone watching, thank you so much. We appreciate all of you watching, the likes, the subscribes, going to the merch store. Thank you so much. Thank you for texting, and we'll see you next week. Take care, everyone. Enjoy.